Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
We go through the ebbs and flows of the offseason as camp is approaching. Players are already there. Veterans will start to report soon. Practice is starting just 2-3 days, right? As we get closer and closer to actual football, we are in this place where the vibe about the season can shift dramatically based on what is the latest thing in the news to drop about the Cleveland Browns. Unfortunately for the Cleveland Browns, the latest thing in the news is Quincy Junkins being arrested on charges of domestic abuse, which is not really something that's going to leave a great taste in people's mouth. And what we have seen since then is a lot of people being more down on the Cleveland Browns since that news has come out and predicting more doom for this 2025 Cleveland Browns team. So the question I want to ask today is, are people's feelings about this more of a reactionary swing to bad news, or is there something more to this? I always like to say this just because every single year I have covered the Browns, this sentence has been true. You're never as good as you think your team is going to be. You're never as bad as you think your team is going to be. There are years coming into the season where I'm excited. I think this team's going to be as good as any other team in the NFL, and they drop a fat goose come the season. And then there are times where, I'm pretty down on the team and they're better than I thought they were going to be. They're never as good as you think you are. They're never as bad as you think you are, right? And if you find yourself wallowing, saying this team's guaranteed to have the number one overall pick, you're often projecting something that's more internal to what the Browns have going on. Even last year, that team was miserable. They were a 3-win team. They beat two of the teams that qualified for the playoffs last year. Like, even that team, which was not good, had everything go wrong that could go wrong with it, still had moments during the season where you saw them achieve things that are pretty remarkable given what their record ended up being and the quality of football they ended up playing down the stretch. So what's the situation with this Browns team? I think it boils down to two different philosophies people have about football. There are folks who are much higher on defensive football in general. And if you're one of those people who have a focus on the defensive side of the ball, who really cares about what goes down on the defensive side of the ball, you're probably going to be much higher on average than on this team than what most people are, right? Because you're looking at a team that is legitimately good, if not great, on defense. And then on the other side of it, if you have fans, and this is like most fans in general, this is how the NFL conditions most fans to be. I'm not indicting fans for being this way, but the average fan has more of an offensive focus, right? Maybe your friend who's a Browns fan that doesn't know about, Andrew Smite, right? Like the backup kicker. Like he doesn't know who the long snapper is. He doesn't know Ryan Point Breon, or she doesn't know who that is. But like they do watch the games. They're going to have more of an offensive focus. They're probably not going to be super high on this Browns team because if you just read the talking points about the Cleveland Browns offense, those points will not paint a positive picture. But here's how I look at it, right? The Browns have huge questions at quarterback. And on offense in general, I think that's undeniable. They have big questions there. We don't know who our quarterback of the future is. We are hoping to get lucky with some late round picks here in Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. We can argue whether Shedeur Sanders is a regular late round pick or not. But at the end of the day, that's what you're gambling on, right? You can feel much better about Shedeur than you do about most other late round picks, which I think is a fair place to be at. But that's ultimately where you're at. You are not in a situation where you're drafting somebody super early and you're crowning them as the future of the franchise, right? This isn't a Prince to be king situation like they have in Tennessee with Cam Ward, where they have drafted him to be the king, right? Somebody who ascends to that role at the quarterback position in Cleveland will have to earn it on their own merit and won't be awarded it by the Cleveland Browns organization. So you don't have a quarterback. And you don't have any established names in that running back room. You have some names that you might be fans of. And that can paint a pretty negative picture, right? The main way I've heard this be painted is the Browns don't have a quarterback. Their run game is built on hope, and their wide receiver room isn't deep. And all those things are true about the Cleveland Browns. But when we present them like that, we make it seem like those issues are unique to the Cleveland Browns, right? Those issues are going to be prohibitive to the Browns trying to be a average to slightly below average 500 football team this year. And I just don't buy that as the case. Yes, the Browns have issues on offense. I'm not overlooking those issues. I've talked about those issues at large a ton of times on this channel. I think the issue that I have, or the difference I have with most people who kind of harp on these issues, is I don't think that these issues are just completely unique to just the Cleveland Browns. And I don't think that these issues are disqualifying from being a 500 football team. We see teams hover around that 500 range all the time and have similar issues to the Cleveland Browns on offense, right? Pittsburgh has been in the same spot Cleveland has been in. I mean, it's almost identical to what the Browns are dealing with on the offensive side of the ball, right? Quarterback concerns, run game not really established the way you want it to, and a wide receiver room that cannot be categorized as deep. That's literally been Pittsburgh the last couple of years. It's also been a team like Indianapolis, New Orleans has been in a similar boat. All those teams are more than capable of going 500 in any given season. All those teams have issues. And I'm not saying that we're the same exact team as Pittsburgh this year. That's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm just saying it's easy to boil a team down to just what you see wrong with them, state those things and make it seem like that's all the team has to offer, and paint a misleading but negative picture of that team, and that can get you more down on a team than what is necessary. We've all done this. I've done this in my professional career where I've been too low on a team because I couldn't get myself off of just stripping a team down to its most negative parts and just evaluating those negative parts and looking for validation in that. We all do it. It's easy to do. It's one of the easiest tricks to do or to trick somebody into. But if you really look at the scope of the Browns offense and you look at what you can go 500 with in the NFL, the Browns offense does not evade that description. Like, it's not a good offense. I wouldn't call it a great offense. And I'm not saying the Browns offense is in a great place, but it shouldn't stop them if they're competent on that side of the ball with execution to being an average football team at like, you know, at the very least, right? Like, I think that's more than possible for this Cleveland Browns football team. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about a roster on offense, while it's not the most impressive, still has its fair share of impressive names on it, right? On the offensive line alone, we're talking about Joe Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin. These are all guys who have been all pros before on the offensive line. I mean, you compare that to like what Pittsburgh has going on, and if you're the Browns, you should feel more confident about your line if they stay healthy than what Pittsburgh has. And I think a lot of the issues that people bring in with, the Browns offensive line, I'm concerned about that. And I don't think those problems should be overlooked, right? Joe Bitonio is not young. He's contemplating retirement on a yearly basis. Wyatt Teller, he's been up and down the last couple of years, but, you know, he's still been pretty good. Like, it's just he hasn't been as good as he was in 2019. Well, no, not 2019, 2020, my bad. Jack Conklin is always a concern to be injured. I'm not saying you should just brush over any issues that the Browns offensive line has, but if we're being honest about this Browns offensive line, we know that they have the potential to still be a pretty solid unit. They're going back to doing what they've done well. And most of the years we talk about the Browns offensive line being bad, if you go back and look at what are the pressure points that made us complain about the offensive line, it's not usually the quality of player that we have scheduled to start. It's the fact that we have a crazy amount of injury, right? The last 2 years, people have been complaining about the offensive line with the Cleveland Browns. Well, that's also been years where we have been injured, not just down to our backup tackle, but our backup tackle, right? Both in 2023, where we were down to James Hudson, and then I think James Hudson got hurt. We had to start guys off the street to play left tackle in 2023. The same exact thing happened for the bulk of 2024 as well. So, yeah, if the Browns can avoid getting down to their third option at left tackle, I think they're going to be a pretty solid offensive line. I think injuries as a narrative for why the Browns offensive line has not been what it has been in 2021 and 2022 has been kind of overlooked by a lot of people. We don't really factor in just how many injuries they had over a certain period of time. And I think what the Browns did this offseason was address the possibility of injuries quite well with bringing in Tevin Jenkins, with bringing in Cornelius Lucas, right? You have DeJuan Jones, who you could throw at left tackle. You drafted Zach Zinter a year prior. Giving him a full offseason, I think, will be critical to his development. Somebody like Luke Whippler, who hasn't really gotten the opportunity, is also somebody that you can use. You have a lot more flexibility than you did last year, and you're a lot further away from having to start Jermaine Ifedi for a bunch of games than you were last year. And I think that's going to make a huge difference to this offensive line, right? Like, I get the concerns that people have about the offensive line, but I don't think that we should be so concerned that we consider it a horrendous offensive line like I think some people have been calling it. I think this offensive line's reputation has been greatly affected by injury and, coordinator changes, offensive line coach changes haven't really helped the issue. But I think the biggest problem the Browns have had over the last couple of years over everything on the offensive line has been injury, right? And if they're better built to supplement that injury, which they are now, which again, their players are getting older, they're still runs the risk of them being injured. Jack Conklin, right? You can't trust him for a whole season, but if you're better built to supplement those injuries this year, then I think you have a better chance of getting out of this looking like a decent offensive line, which, truth be told, in 2020, the Browns offensive line still had injuries that year, but they didn't have their reputation affected by it because they were built to supplement those injuries really well. Andrew Berry did a great job with those back-end signings in 2020. So that's kind of where I am with the offensive line. There are really good players there. Yes, it hasn't been great the last couple of years, but when I go back and look at what I'm really worried about with the offensive line, I'm going back and I'm seeing names that I don't want to be at left tackle, playing left tackle for the Cleveland Browns because of injury, right? Or somebody random playing at guard because of injury. That's kind of been the situation for the Browns over the last couple of years. Now that they're better built to supplement for that injury, I think they can build on that and become be more of that offensive line that we remember them being. So again, not saying Cleveland, Pittsburgh are identical, but you can look at Cleveland's problems and see parallels to what Pittsburgh has going on. Both teams are starting old quarterbacks. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers was better in his career than Joe Flacco was, but we're not having a debate about who the better quarterback in their career is. We're talking about who these guys are right now. And the truth is that Aaron Rodgers hasn't led a team over 500 since 2021. At least Joe Flacco can say that he was over 500 in 2023. Yeah, I'm not saying Joe Flacco at this age is better than Aaron Rodgers, but at this point, they're 40-plus-year-old quarterbacks, and they both look like 40-plus-year-old quarterbacks at this point in their career. And I don't know how much of a difference it makes that one has a better reputation than the other, right? Especially if they're not really at the point to where they're able to recreate those days or will recreate that magic that they had in their 20s on a consistent basis. Both teams don't have deep wide receiver rooms. And that's a team, Pittsburgh, we look at and we go, that team, yeah, they have issues, but they could be 500. And maybe it's faith in Mike Tomlin. Maybe it's faith in the special teams unit to be a reliable source of points for Pittsburgh in these like along the margin games that they like to play. Again, Pittsburgh plays all these games on the margins, so field goal kicking does matter a ton. Maybe it's just more institutional faith in the brand of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And look, Pittsburgh has earned that, right? They haven't gone under 500 in quite a while, but Cleveland, if we just look at it roster for roster offensively, they're in the same class of offensive roster as like a team like Pittsburgh. So no, I don't think this offense is good. I wouldn't go out and say that, but I do think this offense is good enough that if you want to go 500, you can go 500 with this offense as long as you get solid execution out of the guys that you have on this roster. Still got Jerry Jeudy, that's a potential all-pro wide receiver, already a Pro Bowl wide receiver. David Njoku, who I believe does have a all-pro to his name as a tight end, and you can start to see where this offense can kind of lean on. They have strengths there. No, they don't have Nick Chubb, but the Cleveland Browns have not operated with Nick Chubb for the last couple of years, right? The last time they won 11 games, Nick Chubb was hurt most of the season. So this is a team that has proven with this offensive plan, they can still win a lot of games without Nick Chubb. They literally did it in 2023. And if we're being honest, both of Kevin Stefanski's 11 plus win seasons were the seasons where Nick Chubb played the least amount of games in his career. 2020, Nick Chubb was out for a significant portion of the season. 2023, Nick Chubb was out for pretty much the entire season. So yeah, I get that some of us, myself included, aren't fans of Nick Chubb no longer being on the team, but I've already admitted that's more for sentimental reasons than it is for strategic reasons. And even though I think there is a strategic purpose for Nick Chubb on this roster, I'm not going to sit here and act like this team can't be good simply because they don't have Nick Chubb, when I've seen this team, this coaching staff, this core be good without Nick Chubb before. And I think that's probably what was in the Cleveland Browns thought process when they made the move to not bring him back and to get younger at the running back position. You did get younger at running back. We'll see how long Quinshawn's suspension is. If he gets suspended, Dylan Sampson, can he step in that role? Does Jerome Ford make a leap? You're asking a lot of questions out of some young guys at running back this year that does make me a little bit uncomfortable. But the fact that you have anchoring that run game a very veteran offensive line unit makes me feel a lot better, because truth be told, if that offensive line blocks well, then we're not going to be stressing about how many guys are getting what carries, because the lanes are going to be there for a successful run game. If they get back to blocking in the run game like they did in 2020 and 2021, then you can have Dylan Sampson take a ton of carries. And maybe he's ready, maybe he's not, but his job's not going to be that hard. If you open up a lot of rush lanes with a guy like Jerome Ford, he's going to break off a lot of big-time runs. You know, you're going to be able to supplement the running back position a lot easier with that veteran offensive line. So that's probably part of their plan. You also have David Njoku, who could be utilized in the run game, but also in the passing game to make a quarterback's life easier. There are worse situations for a quarterback than to have David Njoku and Jerry Jeudy to throw the ball to. So yeah, the offense isn't great. I'm not going to paint a picture that it is great. I have routinely not called it good this entire offseason, but the Browns aren't going to be the only bad offense in the NFL. There are teams every year with bad offenses that find a way to get to 8 wins, find a way to get to 9 wins. Sometimes teams with bad offenses get all the way to the playoffs. Second round, third round. Hell, Jim Schwartz was on a team with a offense that was and they won a Super Bowl, right? Not saying that's remotely possible for this Cleveland Browns team. I wouldn't predict that. But just saying, just because a team has a bad offense doesn't necessarily disqualify them from doing anything this season. I think some people kind of get caught up in that. So yeah, this offense, is it bad? Yes. Is it as bad? Or here's a better way to phrase it. This offense is bad, but is being a bad offense as detrimental as what most people think it is in the NFL? No. You could be a bad offense, win games. Now, you can't be a dysfunctional offense and win games, which the Browns were last year. Browns weren't simply bad last year. The Pittsburgh Steelers offense was bad last year. Like, the Browns offense was dysfunctional. It was hilariously awful. It was disqualifying at times. It was something that gets people fired, which it did get a lot of people fired. That's what they were last year. If they can upgrade from being a dysfunctional offense to a mediocre offense this year, then yeah, they have a chance to win more games than I think a lot of people are anticipating. Because at the end of the day, they execute well. They have a solid enough game plan. We know Kevin Stefanski's system works. It's worked multiple times before for the Cleveland Browns. It's a question of whether we're going to get quality play and execution from the players at this point. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts about it. I think people are kind of letting their feelings about the offense kind of tank everything about how they feel about the team overall. And while I understand that instinct, I do think it can lead to a bit of an overcorrection for the Cleveland Browns, right? I don't think this team's going to be above 500. I think they'll hover around it. I think there'll be a 7 to 8 win team. Maybe they can get to that 9 to 10 win mark if they get better than average or close to average quarterback play. I think that's another underrated element of this Cleveland Browns team. When they've gotten mediocre to average quarterback play last year, they were able to do some impressive stuff, right? I mean, we're talking about they got a good game out of Jameis Winston. They beat Baltimore in Baltimore. They got a good game out of Jameis Winston. They beat Pittsburgh. Right? Those are two teams that made the playoffs last year. Like, the Browns are the rare 3-win team where most of their wins came against teams that made the playoffs last year. There are teams that win like 7, 8 games, and the big knock against them is that they haven't won against playoff teams, right? The Browns beat 2 of them last year. So the idea that this team's not talented, I think, is a bit silly. This team is clearly talented. The question is, are they going to be competent enough at quarterback? Are they going to be competent enough on the offensive line to be able to take advantage of the fact that they're talented? Last year, they weren't. The offensive line group was just a mess. They had to fire their offensive line coach. They basically discommunicated him the second week of the season for whatever reason. That was a complete dysfunctional mess, right? Whatever was going on with Ken Dorsey, there was an open revolt from the offensive line room to Ken Dorsey and the guys that he brought in to run that room. That was a dysfunctional mess. Quarterback last year was a dysfunctional mess. It wasn't just bad quarterback play. Calling what the Browns quarterback room last year does a disservice to the word bad, right? The Browns quarterback room last year was disqualifying. It was 47th. If you look at success rate for quarterbacks who had over 100 snaps, right? If we're looking at success percentage, which again, if you don't know, success percentage measures how often you were successful on first, second, and third and fourth down, getting the yardage that you would want to gain on those yards. So it's an advanced metric. It takes all of these little nuances into effect. If you look at the Browns quarterback room, they had number 47 out of 47 in Dorian Thompson-Robinson and number 46 out of 47 in Deshaun Watson playing the bulk of their games last year. The Browns were not getting NFL quality quarterback play for most of the season. They were dysfunctional at quarterback. If they can get close to average or mediocre, like let's just say they get the 29th in success percentage this year, or maybe like let's say they get a little bit better, 25th, right? Somewhere in that range. They'll probably be a much better team than most people are anticipating because the upgrade from going to 47th and 46 to like 25th is a massive leap. I took the points that Kirk Cousins scored last year. If we just take the points that Kirk Cousins was responsible for while he was the starting quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons, and you average that out to 17 games, and then you put that number on the Cleveland Browns, that is enough points to flip like 7 of the Browns' losses into wins. That is like the difference from where this team was. That is what they need to make up for it. Also, they need quality field goal kicking from Dustin Hopkins or whoever it is going to be kicking the field goals. But I don't think it's crazy to think that this Browns team is closer to average than bad. I know a lot of people will jump to the comment section and just call this team straight up bad, because that's kind of what people are feeling right now. That's what most people are pushing out. It's a lot of doom and gloom going on there. But I do think this team is closer to average than they are bad. I do think they will eventually be under average because I don't think this year they're going to be able to create a lot of consistency at the quarterback position. I worry about consistency with the running back, and age does concern me with the offensive line, even though I do feel like they're better built to supplement it. I do think it's going to factor in, and I don't know what field goal kicking is going to be. And if those things don't swing the Browns' way, it's going to be hard for this team to be over 500. But I do think they will be hovering around that range for most of the year, or at least find a way by the end of the season to be there, because they might start out pretty rough, right? That first 6 weeks is pretty tough for a team to have all of those games back to back to back. But I wouldn't be surprised if they got out that stretch with a record that's better than what most people anticipated. That's kind of where I'm at with them. I expect the Browns to be closer to average than straight up awful. I don't think this team's going to be awful. I know some people think that this team is just straight up trying to tank this year. I don't think that's the case. I think if they were trying to tank, there would have been more aggressive moves to get some of these veterans off to get draft capital this season. I think they're just seeing what they can get out of this year and then just using it as a blueprint to kind of accelerate themselves back into a serious conversation if they can get the quarterback question answered this offseason, which I think they're hopeful they can do. So we'll see what happens. But that's kind of where I'm at. Let me know what you think. Do you think the expectations are too low with the Cleveland Browns? Are you buying low on the Cleveland Browns right now? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.